Ed Demicco playing, again, Jund Walkers, I think is the easiest way to classify this. VanMeter playing, you know, it looks like a Jund, you know, kind of monsters rabble deck here. So it should be fun to watch.
And Ed's deck does have a Plains Walker element to the deck. There's one Chandra, 3 copies of Xenagos, 3 copies of Nissa, but he's not going full bore like we see with some of these other lists. There's no copies of Vraska, for example, in his list.
Now, VanMeter does have 4 copies of Goblin Rabble Master in his deck. That's why you saw Jund Rabble there. Easier to classify as Jund Monsters, because that's what he's known to be playing. And he's off here with an Elvish Mystic to start things off. A Thoughtseize here will let Demicco see VanMeter's hand. He does have a Rabble Master over there, along with another Elvish Mystic, 2 copies of Sylvan Caryatid, a Temple of Abandon, and a Polukranos.
A pretty Thoughtseize-proof hand overall. Chris has multiple threats in Polukranos and Goblin Rabble Master. He can't really be cut off on mana either because he has another land drop alongside 3 mana creatures.
We'll see what Demicco ends up taking here with this Thoughtseize.
If Ed has a removal spell on top of this Thoughtseize, though, Chris's hand will be waiting for help.
Polukranos will bite the dust. You can see an Abrupt Decay. And here is the second land. It's a copy of Temple of Malice. So a little scry action here for Demicco. Of course, the Jund Walker's deck has a lot of removal, so killing creatures is not very difficult for that deck.
Yeah, 2 copies of Abrupt Decay, 3 copies of Hero's Downfall, a Bioblight, 2 Mizzium Mortars, a Dreadbore, and an Ultimate Price. So a lot of removal and a pretty robust suite of it as well.
Looks like a backup Rabble Master was the draw there for VanMeter. He's going to play a Temple of Abandon. Leave that top card on top. There's a Caryatid, and simply pass the turn back over to Demicco.
And for my money, these are kind of the best Scavenging Ooze decks of the format if you're looking to maximize that card. Plays a lot of removal, a lot of attrition elements, but it still wants cheap cards to keep up efficiency-wise, and Scavenging Ooze fits in so nicely with all those game plans.
There is an Ooze, a Blood Crypt tapped, and Demicco will pass the turn back over to VanMeter. VanMeter will untap those lands along with that Mystic, and draw a card, access to 4 mana this turn. Picks up a copy of Polukranos for his draw.
Chris's list is still on 4 copies of Domri, and that's a card we've seen a lot of lists go down to 3 copies of. I believe Stephen Mann in the Invitational played 0 copies.
Cut them all together.
He cut them all together, but Chris still playing 4.
Chris will deploy the Polukranos before passing the turn back over to Demicco. Demicco will draw a card for the turn.
And I have a feeling this is really bad news for Ed. I think he might have Thoughtseize that Polukranos initially because the removal spell he's on is Abrupt Decay. And if he has no follow-up here, no way to answer the Polukranos, Chris may just run away with this game.
There's a Forest, and that'll just pass the turn back. VanMeter with a draw here. Copy of Gore Clan Rampager. I do wonder how many people VanMeter's gotten with that card over the course of the weekend, simply because it's been a long time since that card's seen really some prominent play.
A lot of it has to do with just the general regression of Jund monsters and green-red monsters in a general sense. The card still typically shows up in some copies. Rarely do you see 4, but often you'll see 2. But just not a deck as a whole that you see very much of anymore.
Decisions here for VanMeter, how he wants to move forward. He's going to start just by attacking with his 5/5. Not a bad place to start, as Demicco will just take the damage. Now VanMeter will cast a Goblin Rabble Master after combat, as well as another copy of Elvish Mystic before passing the turn back.
Well, if Ed is on Abrupt Decay, this at least allows him to cash it in for some utility.
And there is the Decay. So there goes the Rabble Master, and now Ooze can eat something in the graveyard. Gain Demicco a little bit of life back, as well as grow the Ooze.
And for Ed to swing this game around, it's something just as simple as a removal spell for Polukranos. Then it's him with the largest creature in play, and up to 5/5 Scavenging Ooze. Very hard for Chris to check. Not a lot of removal in his deck for a 5/5, just 2 copies of Dreadbore.
5 mana here for Demicco. Maybe it's Nissa time. It is. There's the World Waker. Of course, the Elevator only goes up on that card. So we'll see how Demicco wants to use it. Perhaps make a 4/4 Elemental, or untap a couple of lands there. You can untap the Forest and the Overgrown Tomb. But he says, you know, let me just make this Temple of Malice no 4/4. VanMeter's going to draw a card here. Picks up another copy of Sylvan Caryatid.
And Chris has the option of making some pretty aggressive attacks this turn. I mean, with the Gore Clan Rampager, even his Elvish Mystics are online and available. I would imagine priority number one is just getting the Nissa off the table. As life total's too high for Chris to get super aggressive and just go after Ed. And that Planeswalker can generate quite a bit of 4/4s given enough time.
Of course, one thing you always have to be wary of in these Jund mirrors, and VanMeter probably knows this best, is mortars coming from the other side of the table. Now, I'm not sure there's a lot that Chris can really do about it in this situation, but I imagine he's a little bit scared of that.
I would say there's a tip-off that Mizian Mortars is not in Ed's hand, and that's that the Nissa changed a red source of mana into a 4/4. So if Ed had Mortars in hand, he would probably be looking to make his non-red sources of mana the 4/4s first.
Sure. Rebel Master comes down pre-combat. It'll make a Goblin token, of course.
You can't be certain about that, mind you, but it's a bit of a clue.
And now here is a Gore Clan Rampager that's going to come down. So there goes the Ooze and the Nissa. Rampager so powerful in this Monsters deck.
In these games that are all about getting to 4 and 5 mana, generating 4/4s and 5/5s, being able to break serve on the cheap is at a premium. Part of the reason that a card like Dreadbore is so good in the matchup, just efficiency is the name of the game here.
Demicco draws a card for the turn, but his board is devastated. All he's left now is the 4/4 Temple of Malice. He's going to have to rebuild in a big way here. Again, Mortars is a way for him to come back, but it doesn't look like he has that effect right now. There's 2 mana. There's another Scavenging Ooze. And Overgrown Tomb is going to come into play untapped, so that Demicco can actually activate that Ooze and try to interact with VanMeter.
Interesting to see the Rebel Master in this list, and so far in Standard, we've really only seen it in aggressive mono red lists leading up to this weekend. But you saw, Jeff Hoagland playing this in his 3-color kind of mid-rangey deck. You're seeing Chris here now playing into Monsters. I have a feeling we're going to be seeing this card just kind of all over the place.
I think it's going to branch out quite a bit. Very underrated at first, even by myself, but now seeing it in action, it is a devastating card. Really, really good.
And Synergize is so nice with the Rampager because you have all these 1/1s your opponent has to block. Usually they're going to assume you have no trick. And so it's just a ton of damage and a lot of ways to control the board.
They're almost incentivized to block.
Yeah, exactly. You want to contain the Rebel Master, and also the tokens have to attack. Mm-hmm. So, your opponent's attacking you even when they don't have a trick.
VanMeter's draw for the turn was a copy of Stormbreath Dragon. And he's going to deploy the flyer and do his best Kent Keter impersonation. Now there's a trigger. And everybody's coming on in.
I think Chris was saying, is there the possibility of me getting kind of blown out here inside of combat if Ed has a trick, et cetera, et cetera? I'm pretty sure Chris has drawn the conclusion that Ed has nothing really going on besides Scavenging Ooze pumps, and so he's having to make a really aggressive attack.
Demicco will activate his Mutavault here. Time for a couple of blocks. But it's not a great situation here for Ed at all.
Well, even if Ed had the ground semi-contained for the time being, which is up for debate, he definitely has nothing going on in the air, so the Stormbreath Dragon was really bad for Ed.
Some damage, of course, is going to get pushed through here. Lucanos will get to take care of either the land or the Scavenging Ooze. The Scavenging Ooze actually does have the ability to really play a role in this game now.
I think the Ooze is the one that's got to go here.
Yeah, I think so too. I don't think you mind that land too much. 4/4 is big and all, but the Ooze actually has the ability to become larger than a 4/4, and the life it gains is certainly relevant.
And imagine Ed pieces together, removal spell into removal spell into removal spell. All of a sudden the Ooze might be bigger than anything that Chris has on his side of the table.
So creatures will bite the dust. VanMeter does leave the 4/4 on the table. Demicco is going to end the turn at 6. And VanMeter will just simply pass the turn back.
But the way this is playing out right now, with a removal spell for Stormbreath Dragon, Ed has things sort of stabilized. I mean, there's still 4 1-power creatures in play against 1 blocker, but it's not inconceivable for him to come back from here.
As your removal spell, it's Mizian Mortars. Fortunately for VanMeter, there isn't 3 red mana out there.
Yeah. And Mutavault's another valuable blocker.
Mm-hmm.
It's possible if he doesn't have the mutable, Chris might be able to win by just attacking with my 4 creatures, play some dork after combat, untap, attack you with my creatures again. But the mutable makes that much harder.
Looks like VanMeter's draw for the turn was a copy of Domri. Let's talk about a card we haven't seen for a while.
It has definitely regressed. I mean, earlier in its life cycle in Standard, this was the incentive to build this style of deck.
VanMeter looks at the top, fails to hit. Truthfully, not much of a surprise. He's only played 2 lands this game. Wouldn't be surprised if the top card of his deck is a land at all.
Would make sense.
Yeah. Demicco will draw a mystery card for the turn. Let's see what Ed can find this turn. Card did look pretty powerful. May have been a copy of Rakdos' Return.
That is what it looked like to me.
Yeah.
But that return cannot get rid of the Domri unless Ed is willing to tap his animated land, and I can't really see that happening right now.
Well, he's got you tricked. Says, I want to get Domri off the table, take care of the Sylvan Caryatid in your hand. I'm not going to die this turn. He knows that, but he will go to 2.
The issue is now that he's playing off the top here because on board, Chris has him dead the next turn.
Time Piran comes into play tapped. Demicco will untap at 2 life and will draw a card. He's going to need something good.
Ed might have felt, I know there's probably a land on top of the deck, as you mentioned, and long term, I can't beat this Domri, so he made a risky play there. Chris did have a land on top, in fact, but no help for Ed on the top of his deck there, and he's done for.
Chris VanMeter is going to win game number 1 over Ed Demicco. Jund Monsters up a game here over Jund Walkers as we take a look at the sideboard. And you've got Demicco's in front of you.
4 Golgari Charms, 2 Gore Clan Rampagers, a Sire of Insanity, 2 Lifebane Zombie, 2 Hornet's Nest, 2 Skylashers, 2 Underworld Connections. This might be the Hornet's Nest debut. We've speculated about this card, or at least I have quite a bit. But it's here now, and it's an Ed sideboard. I think this is a reasonable matchup for it, or at least if it's not coming in this matchup, I don't really know when it's coming in. The 2 Lifebane Zombies as well seem fine. Chris has got, some number of green creatures, not as good as it is against, say, green white aggro, but still enough targets.
Other side of things for VanMeter. He's got Amazing Orders, a Putrefy, a Vraska the Unseen, a Magma Spray, 3 Mistcutter Hydras, 2 copies of Rakdos' Return. You throw in an ultimate price, 2 Charms, 2 Flames of the Firebrand. That one's really good against Rabble Red, and then a Bow of Nylea. Pretty interesting sideboard for Chris.
And I like, the sort of generic mid-range cards. The additional removal spells like Mortars and Putrefy, the Vraska, the ultimate price. I think the copies of Rakdos' Return will come in here as well. This is pretty typical stuff.
You have to imagine Chris actually probably feels right at home in this sort of matchup. He's been playing Jund Monsters for who knows how long. And, when he was grinding it out in Season 2, a lot of people are playing Jund Monsters too.
He had a lot of success playing in the mirror match. And I think a lot of that came down to just sideboarding better than most players.
I think so.
I don't think the mirror match has a ton of play to it in terms of what's happening on the board. I think the games are fairly straightforward to play, but I think there's a lot of room to maneuver in terms of how you sideboard, what cards you want to have, what cards you want to be removing.
Yeah, I think that's, the difficult part. Do you remove mana accelerants at all? Course Crew Fix? How much removal do you want to have after sideboard? What's the correct number of large creatures? Again, I think that's all stuff that Chris has actually figured out.
And how good are the Planeswalkers was something that I heard debated amongst various players as well. Xenagos and Domri, some people, the range on opinions of people that I talk to range from they're the best cards in the matchup to those are the first cards I take out.
Yeah, I think Chris liked Xenagos a lot in the matchup where I thought it was actually quite bad.
I'm in your camp. I was never impressed with Xenagos in the mirror match, but Chris has had, again, a lot of success playing the mirror, and he is an advocate for it.
And yeah, he said he liked Xenagos a lot in the mirror, so, I'm willing to trust his judgment on that one. He is the Jund Monsters master, after all. Been doing it for a long time and been doing it very, very well. Sitting here at 7-1 in this tournament too. With any luck, if he wins this match, he's able to draw into the top 8, but he's got to get by the Jund Planeswalkers deck, which does have a lot of removal in it after sideboard.
A fair bit of it game 1 too. Yeah. Although not really that much in the board. The cards that I think are going to be coming in here again are Lifebane Zombie and Hornet's Nest. There's no additional spot removal. That's all contained in the main deck, unless you count Golgari Charm, which is not really for this style of matchup.
Hornet's Nest has not made its debut yet.
Oh, I'm looking forward to it.
Me too. Probably the most flavorful card in M15.
It's really high on the list. I think you can make an argument for Hot Soup.
Ah, yes. I forgot about the old soup.
Literally and figuratively.
Yeah.
A flavorful design.
I did forget about that carding system. Soup is lame.
What do you mean?
Yeah, it's just kind of lame. I never am just like, you know what I want? Soup.
But you grew up in cold weather. That's odd. That's usually something, you know, fall, winter roll around. That's a thing.
I don't know. I just, at no point in my life have I just been like, man.
I thought you meant the card. It's like, I don't know, man. It's
No,
fine in draft. Yeah.
Card's fine. Just soup in general. Just kind of blech.
Well, there's a wide range of what it can be, you know.
I suppose it could be tasty.
It is.
It could be.
Well,
it's just there's never a want for soup.
okay.
I guess. Do you ever just have an inkling for a
Yeah,
bowl?
absolutely.
What's your favorite soup?
Probably minestrone.
That's the oldest answer I've ever heard.
No, the oldest answer is split pea,
That's true.
which I also like.
Yeah, obviously. Of course you do.
It's not my favorite.
I did have some New England clam chowder last week.
And
I don't know if you count that as soup. Like, I don't know if you count soup and chowder as the same
Yeah,
thing,
it is all. It's the same family at least.
Split pea, really?
Yeah.
Wow. I don't even know.
That is.
I don't even know
that
what
is
to say.
that is the oldest one.
I don't even know what to say right now. It looks disgusting. It doesn't actually taste that bad, but I could go for some chicken noodle on occasion. Safe soup. Safe.
Coloring inside the lines.
Yeah, it's just really the safest play. Though I will say there are plenty of people who like tomato soup.
I do not.
Unplayable.
Unplayable.
That's an unplayable soup.
It is unplayably bad.
Let alone dipping grilled cheese into that. Unplayably bad soup.
Yeah, I tried it because I when we had to eat from Dead Average Uno's during the Worcester Open, I gave it a shot because so many people do it. I just assumed it has to be a thing, and it was just bad again.
I forgot about the DAU.
Yeah.
Dead Average Uno's.
Yep.
Shout out to Dead Average Uno's.
Yeah. You keep doing you.
Hey, we'll be back in Worcester.
I know.
In a little bit this year.
If you have some sort of frequent customer card, let us know about it because we're going to be back.
For at least one visit, probably two.
Yeah.
Looks like Ed is going to take a mulligan here. Chris happy with his 7 on the draw.
It's so weird to see Chris back in the feature match area because I feel like earlier this year, he was the only person we were really showing.
Yeah, we've had, it's weird to say we've taken a break from Chris.
Yeah.
Because that's not really the best way to put it, but he has not been in the feature match area as much since he's qualified for the Players' Championship.
Chris has taken a break from us, I feel like, is the more accurate term.
I can respect that.
Yeah.
We might be stuck with him for the Standard Open, though. Again, he wins this match. Chances are he can draw into the top 8.
I like to see him back with old Reliable, too.
Yeah, I mean, this is just what he knows, right?
Yeah.
This is his safe place. He's been doing this for so long. One could argue the deck isn't even that well positioned right now, but, I mean, he knows how to play it inside and out, so who are we to stop the man?
I think Rabble Master has the potential to shift a lot of matchups around. It's another real substantial threat against control decks. And sometimes this deck's light on that sort of thing. I mean, you accelerate, but then, your Pelucanos, your Storm Breath gets killed, and you just have some mana creatures and a Courser left over. That happens a lot with the deck.
You will note in his deck, as he starts the game off with the Temple of Triumph, here's a Thoughtseize from Demicco. So we'll take a look at how to handle Storm Breath Dragon, Rakdos' return, Domri, Elvish Mystic, along with the Xenagos, then a Blood Crypt and a Mana Cocoon. So he's got, the mana acceleration and some powerful cards. You will note there are no copies, of course, of Brewfix here. Rabble Master has thrown those out of the way.
Yeah, and it's a much more aggressive approach to the deck, and once you're doing that, 4 copies of Gore-Clan Rampager makes a lot of sense in the deck as well. So the structure of the deck is pretty logical, even though it's quite a bit different, and for many people, of course, their Brewfix is untouchable.
See what Demicco would like to take with his Thoughtseize here. Very tough choice, honestly. Chris has got the necessary land, so trying to take Elvish Mystic probably isn't all that appealing. What's the better threat? Stormbreath Dragon, Domri, Xenagos, or that Rakdos return, which will kind of have its shadow over the game the entire time.
This is one of those hands where, there's a lot of good stuff, but no standout card in Chris's hand, nor is there one integral piece.
And there goes the return. There's an overrun tomb there for Demicco. He'll pass the turn back over to VanMeter. VanMeter will draw. It's a copy of Sylvan Caryatid. It's a very mana-efficient accelerant on this particular turn.
And if I'm Chris, I'm casting. Interesting. That felt like a good time to stick the Caryatid because it's not like his life total is really being taxed in this matchup, and it is hexproof and more mana efficient.
It does, of course, save 2 life this way.
That is the upshot of it, but I'm not sure how much 2 life it really matters in this matchup with the pacing of the game this way.
Missing Mortars to draw here for Chris. Manic Influence, the last land in his hand.
You know, based on whatever Ed did on that turn, it's not inconceivable that Chris would have wanted to go Domri plus Elvish Mystic as his 3rd turn, so. He can't do it the other way around because the Caryatid's 2 mana.
Life-Mean Zombie really messing up Chris's draw here. You know, he would have loved to drop Xenagos this turn. Can't do that now.
Right.
I suppose he could, and then he would tick it up and doesn't really do very much.
Yeah. He has the alternate line at this point where he can, you know, Mortars away the Lifebane Zombie and play his Caryatid, but he has so much mana in his hand that he may want to just hold on to this Mortars for, you know, a bigger overload down the line rather than just using it to kill this Lifebane Zombie.
Yeah, he's going to go with Xenagos. Yeah, Elevator going up or making a Satyr token is the question.
This feels like if Chris is going to deploy it here that he needs to plus. It just doesn't feel like the 2/2 is valuable enough. It's not like the opportunity cost of making Ed attack the Xenagos is particularly high here. You know, Chris is at 19. The game essentially just started.
Yeah, he does tick that up. One thing you'll notice here is that Demicco does not have red mana just yet. He's an attack for 3, so Xenagos is going to predictably go down to 1. And Demicco will pass the turn back. So VanMeter will untap and take a draw here. The ability to generate a decent amount of mana. Draw for the turn was a copy of Blue Cross.
So Chris has a couple lines he can take this turn, depending on what he exactly wants to do. He can play the Pelugrinos plus the Xenagos and Mortars away the Lifebane Zombie. He can just make a token and attack in Mortars. I have a feeling here that Chris is trying to sit on this Mortars for as long as possible.
Yeah,
if he can find better lines of play, alternate lines of play, that allow him to save it for a potential overload, I think he wants to do that.
Just going to put up the Xenagos. There's Mortars. You did notice kind of the deliberate way that he did that, because if in response to Xenagos going up, Demicco has a removal spell, it doesn't work out the way he wants it to.
Right.
But things do break VanMeter's way. He will now take up Domri. Does miss, but a land is good there if he has one. Demicco's draw for the turn was finally a red source, copy of Stomping Ground. That's going to come into play on tap. Planeswalkers are starting to run rampant now, though, for VanMeter.
Yeah. Even something like Rakdos Return is not that good for Ed because being attacked on 2 fronts.
Oh, ho, ho, ho. The mighty Hornet's Nest biz.
Making its SCG Live debut.
I am absolutely thrilled. Please let this be a staple some way, somehow.
It's not very good on this board. There's a lot of cards that Hornet's Nest is excellent against. I don't think Xenagos is really one of them.
Go ahead, overload Mortars into that.
That's true.
So let's see how that works for you.
Unfortunately, against Satyr tokens and a Stormbred Dragon, it's not doing a ton.
That picture is horrifying.
Hornet's Nests are horrifying.
If I came across one of those, I would run the other direction so fast. So no thank you. It should have a point of power.
No, because the nest is just the structure.
So I understand. I think it would be ironic if it had a point of power.
Oh, okay.
Like Deathrite Shaman.
Right. It would be bad flavor, though.
It'd be very bad flavor. It could be like a prickly hornet's nest.
I don't think that's a thing.
There's a forest. 5 mana. Are we going to the skies, perhaps?
Yep.
Looks like it. Storm Breath Dragon. Will bite an ultimate price. Perhaps the hornet's nest should have flying?
No, again, the hornet's nest is just a building. It's just a structure.
But the building can be in the air.
Well, it doesn't levitate.
I suppose the dragon could fly over it.
Right.
Sure, okay. Again, this is why you're the game designer and I am the commentator.
Well, this is just some biology 101
No,
stuff.
no, no.
I mean,
It sounds like it's much more difficult than that. Yeah, it does. It sounds much more difficult. A Thoughtseize will take the Pelucranos. Leaving VanMeter with just an Elvish Mystic. Domri going to take up here to 6. And will miss.
And something you don't really see very much in these sort of Jund-style mirror matches. Usually when someone goes ultimate with a Domri, it's because the game was a total runaway.
Mm-hmm.
Chris is just not really in a position to attack just yet, and Ed's not doing anything. So Chris can just build up the board like this.
The nest is holding it down.
Well,
too afraid to attack into the nest. Okay. There's a pack rat. That might change things a little bit. VanMeter will draw a card.
Ed's got a little menagerie going, you know.
Yeah.
He's got some hornets. He's got some rats.
Change the name of this deck to Bees and Rats. There's a Stomping Ground tapped. The Menagerie is also acceptable. There's a rat token. Gonna discard Missing Mortars.
Yeah, that one stings for Ed, but he doesn't even have a second red source of mana, much less a third one. So,
And I'm fine switching gears to making rats at this point, I think.
it's still tough. Chris's board is just he can block pretty effectively here.
Yeah. Pack Rat is an interesting dimension, I think, to the Jund Walker's deck. This is the first time I've seen it in this deck before.
Mm-hmm.
So it does make for, an interesting kind of sub-game you can play.
And it does make sense why Ed's removal suite is kind of all over the place. One of this, two of this, two of this. When you have Pack Rat in your deck, you can cast the stuff that works and discard the cards that don't work, obviously. So flexibility is at a premium. Chris does have a relatively straightforward block here of putting a satyr in front of one of the rats and a satyr and an elf in front of another.
Lets him win in combat.
Yeah.
This will work just fine too, I believe. You can just, everybody getting up.
Might just be erring on the side of caution.
Not too sure what that card is.
Yeah, double blocking the rat token makes sense because if you put a single rat in front, if you put a satyr in front of one rat and no, it kind of works either way. Even if Ed draws a removal spell in this spot, it's still roughly fine either way. I think Chris is just making sure nothing goes wrong.
Discard a forest. Yep, so these rats are going to end up off of the table. Chris will lose quite a few things there, but what's most important here for him is that Domri's ultimate is live.
It is now unchecked, and a Domri Emblem plus Xenagos is going to be really hard for Ed to get through. And giving his creatures double strike means he cares much less about the death touchers that will come off of this hornet's nest when Chris is ready to start attacking.
Yeah. There's the emblem. VanMeter always carrying that around in his box just in case.
That's an optimistic token to have ready.
If things are going right, you get to reach for that quite a bit. There is that. Sounds Chris's creatures have all the text, including haste.
Oh,
That's not nice.
that is brutal for Ed.
Yeah, fight ya. And now some 2/2 double strikers will come in. The nest will get in the way, but VanMeter will get the trample over. Double strike, deal a whole bunch of damage this turn.
Chris is, technically leaving his Xenagos dead on the way back to the Hornet tokens, but that doesn't matter. He's so beyond lethal on the way back.
Yeah. There are the bees. They do have death touch and flying. Demicco will draw a card and will extend the hand. Chris VanMeter will win this match over Ed Demicco. 2-0. Jund Monsters does take down Jund Planeswalkers, and for Chris, he moves on to 8-1. And with any luck, able to draw into the top 8 next round.
His deck felt just a little bit leaner and a little bit more consistent than Ed's. Ed's has a lot of moving parts in it. Chris is a lot more straightforward, and Ed never really had the right mixture of stuff to do and ways to stop Chris's stuff.